Okay, thank you everyone for joining. We'll just get started in a second. I think if we are missing one speaker, but I'm told they're in the queue downstairs, so they will be here in a second. Okay, thank you. So the meek will inherit the earth, but not their mineral rights. This is a quote attributed to John Paul Getty, an American industrialist and oil tycoon who founded the Getty Oil Company in 1942. In a sense, it sums up how the fossil fuel development paradigm and previous centuries of colonial extraction of silver, rubber, nitrates and other commodities from the global south have been driven by an extractive mindset. This position suggests that the hard-fought rights won by communities do not extend underground and can be, to excuse the pun, undermined in the pursuit of commodity-driven development. Today, as the world embarks on a new wave of resource extraction, on another wave of digging stuff up out of the earth on other people's land, does this attitude still hold? With the mining of transition minerals such as copper, nickel, lithium and rare earth metals purportedly being accelerated to support a green energy transition, will it continue to reflect Getty's attitude that what lies in the ground is fair game for the powerful to extract for their own ends? Or is it possible that this new mineral supercycle will see institutions protect communities, respect rights, and maybe even extend them, and develop alternative approaches which would reduce the need to keep digging stuff up out of the ground? Especially given that the current projections by the IEA suggest that there's simply not enough minerals in the earth to meet the demands created by net zero scenarios by 2050 if current consumption patterns continue. Our panel today is going to consider some of these questions and more, particularly the role that multilateral development banks like the World Bank and IFC might play in developing these growing transition minerals sectors, but also in setting high standards for public and private engagement in mineral value chains and ensuring that benefits and revenues are distributed more equitably. Our discussion comes at a time when multilateral institutions and development finance more broadly, however, are being repurposed for national ends and are coming under pressure to change policies to support companies and industries in the global north and secure supply routes of transition minerals for their biggest shareholders. In this context, while transition minerals industries and their financiers deploy green rhetoric, we must be mindful that minerals and metals are equally important to the industrial war machine as they are to renewable energy. If one might ask why certain key players on the international stage who call climate change a con job and who are highly sceptical of renewable energy are so interested in securing transitional mineral supplies, the importance of copper, nickel and rare earth metals for building fighter jets, radar systems and long-range missiles may provide the answer. On top of this, we have to consider the huge environmental and social impacts to people and planet that come with metals mining. This includes, but is not limited to, health, biodiversity, water and air quality, and livelihood impacts, as well as the impacts on land rights and indigenous peoples. As a reminder that research has shown that 54% of deposits of transition minerals are located on or near the lands and territories of indigenous peoples. For this reason, there's a lot of ground for MDBs to be cautious when finding new projects to finance. And a panel convened by the UN Secretary General last year argued that human rights values must be put at the core of all mineral value chains. And that panel published a set of principles and recommendations on how institutions can achieve this. So with that in mind, today we will hear from a panel of civil society and institutional experts on the role that multilateral institutions have to play in rapidly expanding transition minerals industries. Vaishnavi Varadarajan of the International Accountability Project will share research on how MDBs are getting involved in the sector. We'll hear from Robert Schlotterer from the World Bank and later Anna Rudaroy, who will give us the insider scoop on how their institutions are approaching the engagement. And that's Anna Rudaroy of the IFC, sorry. But also we have to be mindful that the voices of communities and civil society have often been absent from these discussions around these sectors. So we'll also hear examples and case studies from the community perspective of how harms can be mitigated. So later, Karabo Mokonyana from PowerShift Africa will discuss mineral sectors in Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Leandro Gomez from the Fundación Ambiente y Recursos Naturales in Argentina will consider how MDBs can take a more responsible approach to metals mining. We were hoping to also have a speaker from Pakistan here today who was going to raise a few issues related to one of IFC's major and sort of big first commitments in the sector, which is the Reko Diq copper mine in Pakistan. but unfortunately, due to some travel problems, he can no longer make it. But just to say that a number of CSOs did publish an open letter on this project, which has been sent to IFC, raising a number of concerns around the security situation in Pakistan and the environmental impacts as well. And that can be found on the recourse website. So we'll start with Vaishnavi, who's going to give a bit of sort of context and scene setting. Vaishnavi works as the Asia-Pacific Coordinator at International Accountability Project. Through her work at IAP, she supports community-led campaigns and CSOs in the region in accessing information on development finance, along with advocacy strategies on holding companies, governments, and multilateral development banks accountable. Vaishnavi has worked on the intersection of climate justice and community-led development for more than a decade in South Asia, supporting communities in confronting harmful extractive and energy projects and advocating for their rights and demands.
Thanks, Dan. Is this one? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Vaishnavi Vardarajan from International Accountability Project, and today I'm going to be sharing a little bit about some initial trends that we're seeing on MDB investments in transition minerals and their environment and human rights risks and impacts on communities. So a lot of our work at the International Accountability Project is on access to information on development finance. And we do that through a civil society-led database that we coordinate that is called the Early Warning System. And the Early Warning System works to organize, summarize, and standardize projects of the largest, 15 of the largest development banks that we monitor. This work has been going on since 2016, and as of now, we are tracking around more than 30,000 projects, and this information is updated daily. We have also been closely looking at some of the sectoral investments of MDBs, and for that purpose, we also launched an energy finance tracker last year. This is a visual data tracker that is publicly accessible that maps the financial trends and flows of MDBs investments in the energy sector and also allows civil society to go further into the trends and understand the impacts of these investments. So within the tracker, we have been monitoring projects from January 1st, 2022 to present, and this information is also updated quarterly. For this initial research, we have looked very closely into a subset of around 47 projects on transition minerals that we have seen since 2022. And the data sources that we have relied on are, of course, MDB project websites, the company websites, but we've also looked into media and CSO reports for any missing or additional information, and also trackers like the Business Human Rights Resource Center Transition Minerals Tracker. So what we see amongst the minerals that are being funded through transition mineral investments, it is lithium and copper that dominates most of the investments. Largely it is lithium, and then after that copper, but there are also other minerals that are financed like nickel, tin, cobalt, and rare earth metals. Across the mineral value chain, we see different kinds of investments. A large number of the MDB investments are more on the extraction projects, but also on processing and manufacturing. We also see that some of these investments are together, so if there's investments for extractions also linked to processing and manufacturing. MDBs also play a huge role in providing policy and planning support to governments on how they can strengthen their policies and mechanisms on critical minerals. And we're also seeing that MDBs are playing a role to support companies with the feasibility studies and environment social impact assessments of these projects, and these are more in form of pre-investment technical assistance. We're also seeing an increasing trend of support for transition minerals through transportation and logistic hub projects. The Lobito Corridor in Southern Africa being a prominent example, which is being invested by multiple MDBs, including DFC, AFDB. When we look at the geographical distribution, most of the projects are located in Europe and Central Asia, and then followed by Latin America and Africa. But when we see it is within Latin America and Africa, it is investments for extraction projects, and the manufacturing and processing industries are in Europe and Central Asia. The countries that we're seeing having the most amount of projects are Chile, Uzbekistan, Mongolia, Argentina, and France. Among the MDBs investing in transition minerals, we're seeing the most amount of investments by the European Investment Bank, but followed not too far behind by the Development Finance Corporation, which is also playing a big role in transition minerals through the Mineral Security Partnership Program, and then the Inter-American Development Bank, the European Bank on Reconstruction and Development, and IFC have also some prominent investments in transition minerals. We see that all the investments by DFC and IFC are for extractive projects, and EIB has been more prominent in investments for the processing and manufacturing sector. In the type of investments, more than 50% of these projects are via loans, followed by 32% through advisory services, and a lesser amount of 6% through equity investments and 4% by grants. While comparing public and private financing, since transition mineral projects do require a lot of capital, there is most of the financing, 81% of the projects that we tracked are going via private financing, and only a small 20%, 19 to 20% is through joint ventures with state or minority public ownership. With regards to financial intermediaries, we see around 11% of these 47 projects were through financial intermediaries. Among the private actors that are supported by these investments, we've analyzed some 110 companies that was in our data set. And one thing that came out, which is really problematic, that 65% of these companies are located in the global north. So just going back to the point that Dan made about transition minerals repeating the same extractive patterns, we're seeing that the companies that are getting these investments are in the global north, and the extraction sites are in Latin America and Africa. And the companies that are getting these investments are also companies that have been linked to environment and human rights allegations across the globe. And we're seeing that there are larger multinational corporations like Rio Tinto, Barrick Gold, Trinity Metals, Glencore, that have received some of these investments. While monitoring the information on transition minerals, we also noticed that there are gaps in the access to information of these projects. In many projects, it was hard for us to trace which mineral is being financed, specifically in investments related to policy reform support or those that target financial intermediaries. Many times, we also did not see any contact points or client information in these projects. There's also information missing on how communities can file complaints with the complaint mechanisms. Among the risk rating of the projects, many of the projects have not had a risk rating done. So yeah, I think over 50 of the projects it was missing. But within the projects where there was risk rating done, there was a higher risk rating given to these projects, identifying the significant risks. We looked closer into these projects through other resources to see how communities are impacted, and we saw that around 60% of the projects have had communities impacted, that have been impacted previously or will be impacted. Many communities have also already organized opposition to these projects in form of protests, petitions, or complaints via courts or IAMs. 15 of these projects we saw were also located in legacy mine sites or close to legacy mine sites. So these can be communities that have already been impacted by an existing project, which is now being expanded through transition mineral investments. So many of these communities may be impacted a double time by these investments. We also saw that there's missing information of if these investments are on indigenous customary territories, but we looked at the project locations and we found at least 14 projects that were on indigenous land. Yeah, when we look at the human rights impacts of these projects, we're also seeing that many of these investments are in places that have restricted or closed civic spaces. Around 1/3 of the projects were located in militarized or conflict-affected areas, and at least 10 of the projects have had evidences of reprisals. Yeah. Closing up, so we see that MDB investments in transition minerals do carry serious consequences for communities whose lands, water, and livelihoods are at stake. We do have some recommendations. I'll go through them quickly, but at a very basic level, we do ensure that MDBs should have proper disclosure of information about the project details. They must respect and comply with free, prior, informed consent of affected indigenous, customary, and local communities. This also means not supporting investments where communities have not given their consent for the project. There should be stronger safeguards, and this includes human rights and environment assessments, but also gender assessments and mine restoration plans. MDBs should also influence countries to have stronger regulations and policies on transition minerals. We think MDBs need to step up their role to protect environment and human rights defenders who are impacted by these projects. And lastly, we need MDBs to finance a just and human rights-centered transition, which supports local value addition, benefit sharing, and also is in line with the recommendations of the UN Secretary General Panel on Critical Minerals. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. So next we're going to hear from Robert Schlotterer of the World Bank. Robert is the practice manager for the World Bank's Energy and Extractives Global Department. He has held multiple positions at the World Bank across several regions, as well as the global practices and corporate assignments, including lead infrastructure, finance specialist, and manager of the Agile Bank program in the World Bank's Strategic Initiatives Unit. His most recent assignment was as operations advisor in the South Asia region, and prior to joining the bank, Mr. Schlotterer was a vice president for commercial, export, and project finance origination with KfW IPEX Bank in Germany. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you very much, and a very good morning, or a hello, because I understand we have many more viewers online and from around the world. It's really a pleasure being here, and it is really an honor, Vaishnavi, to follow on your very good analysis and very impressive analysis. There's a number of data points that I didn't even have right. I'm glad to see that you also had lined up the engagements of the MDBs, and clearly I didn't see the World Bank, so either we have failed our job or we need to do more. But I guess that's why we are here today. So I understand I have 8 minutes. My team knows that there's many of them here. I have a tendency to speak long, but I try my best to stay within the time. I think I like also a lot, you set the stage very well, that mining is around us not only now. Mining has been around for decades, if not centuries. The main question is, how do we go about mining? And certainly at the World Bank, we do believe that in the last couple of years, there have been some new trends that we are seeing that identify a huge opportunity for development for our client countries. Mining, while not necessarily being the biggest direct job creator, can be a very powerful engine of growth for economies in developing countries, and the indirect and induced jobs potential is enormous. So jobs growth should, as a first point, make clear why we do believe at the World Bank Group mining has to come back to the center stage, because as you know, our mission is to eradicate poverty on a sustainable planet. And we believe that jobs growth is also a mining agenda. When we look at countries that got it right, we also see that the importance of the mining sector compared to their GDP growth is important. Likewise, we see where countries didn't get it right, we don't see such a strong correlation. So it's all a matter of getting it right. Now, how do we at the World Bank Group think we're going to help countries to get it right? First of all, we don't start today. I would say that we are one of the few institutions who never abandoned mining, though we certainly may have been more absent from the sector for some time. But for the last 60 years, the World Bank Group has kept a mining expertise, and I'm very proud of my team, again, who is, many of them are in the room, who have not abandoned the cause. And now this becomes a very powerful asset for the institution to have. We also see that we need to think bigger and differently about mining. We need to see mining as an integrated part of economic development within the development of value chains. I think you hinted towards that trend, and I think your analysis also documents that clearly. I do believe we need to see more value addition in developing countries, because that is where an enormous economic potential and jobs growth potential lies as well. For doing that, though, we also need to think very holistically, and I would claim that our mining practice has to be working together with many other different sectors within the World Bank Group, and we are doing that already. You mentioned transport corridors. We know that mining is an energy-intensive activity, and we also know that it has important effects on the environment and societies, and so all of this has to be brought holistically to the agenda. And last but certainly not least, we also do believe that mining will stay overarchingly a private sector business. It is highly technically complex, it is super capital intensive, which needs the private sector to help. And we see the private sector as an important partner, but at arm's length with a government that is well informed and has the capacity to engage with the private sector. Now, how do we work already, and how do we think about working even stronger? So within the World Bank Group, we will divide our task and assistance in a spectrum between improving the enabling environment and unlocking private investments. You will hear shortly from my colleague Aniruddha that the IFC does with the private sector. We also have MIGA, as you know, who is very good at mobilizing through our new guarantees platform, private capital. And the World Bank's main role we are seeing is, first and foremost, focusing on the enabling environment. Getting the capacity, getting the frameworks right, so that governments and countries benefit equally from the wealth that mining provides, and ultimately have a development story for their own country's development in exploration of mining value chains. Secondly, unlocking the mining mineral value chains will center around three main pillars. One is the policy and governance frameworks. Secondly, we will look at the foundational infrastructures. I mentioned that before. And then, of course, we have to also make sure that we bring in the private sector. And I also took note of your comment of certain firms that seem to be predominantly in the sector. But let's agree, there are many more firms also locally that exist. So we should also look at developing the private sector in countries when the private sector is also ready to do the responsible ways of doing mining and developing mine projects as our standards require. Now, talking about standards, I think that is a very heart of the matter of our conversation, and looking forward to exchange more with you. Needless to say that we have existing frameworks. We have the ESF and we have the performance standards. One has been consulted upon with your help already. I think the other one is just going into a new round of consultation, the performance standards. We do believe that this provides a very robust frameworks to do mining projects along many other projects that the World Bank Group does. And of course, it is super important that especially in mining, we are looking at environmental and social risk, because this is one of the most complex sectors which is prone to many risks that we see. A risk of biodiversity disturbance, water intensity, safety of gender-based violence, and other important social impacts that need to be properly managed and mitigated to get mining right. When it comes to getting mining right and doing things differently, we also do believe that the just emerging knowledge bank is another powerful tool we are bringing to the equation. Today, we are living in a world where artificial intelligence, digitization, are not only users of minerals, but they can become very powerful inputs to the mining agenda. Believe it or not, but today, artificial intelligence can help geosciences to better inform us of where geological potential may lie without touching a single stone on the ground. This has an enormous potential not to disturb communities, and especially not where ultimately there wouldn't be any finds. And we do believe there is many more technological innovations that can help making mining a better industry and evolving from maybe history that has had its ups and its downs. So we have also initiatives like the Climate Smart Mining that will help us to look at decarbonization potential. And needless to say, when we do mining, we will do it fully in line with the national determined contributions agenda in alignment of the Paris Agreement. Now I want to come back still to the value addition because yes, we do believe we have very solid standards. Yes, we do believe when we do mining, we will do it with an angle for jobs and growth, equity, and balanced benefit sharing. But we also do believe the real prize this time around in this mining cycle is the value chain development. We need to make sure that more value is retained in country. And value retention of mining is along the value chain. Now, your analysis was also very pertinent, showing certain countries who are doing already value addition and others not. This is not a coincidence, and I do believe this is certainly not because of the selectivity of the multilateral development banks or other investors. It has to do with the realities on the ground. Processing is a complex business, and when we come to manufacturing of goods, it becomes even more complex. To get it right and to attract the investments we need, you need to also think about the labor force, the skill setting, and all of these elements need to come into play. Now I get the sign that I'm again getting long, so let me accelerate, and this is the second last slide. Let me just say, and this is self-explanatory, certainly we can only do a good job if we continue to listen and engage. This starts with the forum here today with you, but it is equally happening as we speak. Colleagues of the IFC are at the ICMM at the London Metals Exchange Week. 2 weeks ago, I met with the Asian Development Banks and other MDB partners, and we have bilateral meetings with government clients here as we speak in Washington. And we will continue to use our convening power to stay in dialogue and exchange views, and most importantly, we should always listen to what stakeholders bring to us to help us making the mining sector a real engine of growth. But let me finish by repeating what I think we all agree on. Mining is one of the most complex infrastructure sectors that there is. And certainly it needs to be tackled right. And that starts with focusing on an enabling environment which is conducive to investment, but which also helps governments and people to get shared benefits, which is done transparently, where we have fiscal frameworks that benefit the countries, and where countries are also equipped with the right capacity provided through technical assistance, so that we create investment frameworks where the private sector can thrive and communities succeed. And let me finish with that. This is very important. Most important lessons of 60 years is this. Mining will never succeed if communities don't thrive. So community engagement and working with the people on the ground is most important to get mining right. But when it does, it can be a powerful engine for development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert, for bringing those very important perspectives and particularly for flagging the importance of value retention and of the safeguards as well. And I know a lot of CSO colleagues in the room are looking at the IFC Sustainability Framework Update with a view to these sectors and the safeguards around land and indigenous peoples. Okay, so next we're going to hear from Karabo Mokonyana of PowerShift Africa. Karabo is a senior campaigns associate at PowerShift, where she champions Africa's just transition through research and advocacy.
Thank you so much, Dan. Good morning, everyone. I think let me just start off by saying that, the minerals and metals conversation in the context of Africa is quite deeper, and that we're talking about a continent that has experienced colonialism, and a lot of that was, resource extraction, resource exploitation. So we're talking about, this conversation on minerals and metals is not necessarily just economic development and, advancing the development narratives of the African continent, but there's a deeper conversation on retaining our resources, ensuring that our resources are actually building for us. But there's also a bigger conversation on where Africa sits on the supply chain that we are speaking about. And currently, the African continent is a supplier in this supply chain. We are basically the providers of these resources to the rest of the world, similar to mainly the global south, really. And it's very much important to contextualize how it is that the bank itself really approaches this conversation from an African context because of those two caveats that I've put forward: the exploitation, the colonial background, the neo-colonialism that we also see that is happening on the continent, but also who we are in this entire value chain being just the supplier. And we do not want to be the supplier in the conversation on minerals and metals. So I really appreciate the value addition component, but also the RISE initiative as well. But it's going to be very much important to interrogate who we're positioning Africa as in the conversation on supply chain, because we want to move away from just being the supplier in this bigger conversation on minerals and metals. Now, mine is just to really point out some of the things that we are seeing on the continent. And the reason why we really wanted to have this conversation is to basically nudge the bank to start having, conversation on these minerals, particularly transition minerals, because the demand has tripled. The demand has really increased. The suppliers are on our continent, for sure. But also there's a lot of social and environmental issues that we are seeing on the ground. And we cannot necessarily have this conversation as a blanket minerals conversation because of this tripling component, but also because of a lot of the violations that we are seeing. So I'm going to speak about, three, but in the context of two different countries. So there's the DRC. And I think I don't really need to say much about the DRC and the things that have been happening in the DRC. I think it's been publicized so much in terms of the minerals conversation and the amount of human rights violations and abuses that have happened as a result of the cobalt situation in the DRC. And the World Bank has funded the Promenades project, which includes the minerals governance in the DRC, but also aspects of artisanal miners and small-scale miners in this context. And then I also speak about Zambia as well. And Zambia, similarly, there's a Zambia Energy Transition Minerals Roadmap that the bank is also financing, but also the Lobito corridor between the two. So this is more so transporting of minerals between the corridor itself. And I just want to list some of the things that we are seeing in terms of, safeguards or the lack of safeguards, or even in the aspects of the risks that we are seeing. There's a lot of issues really on the ground, and it requires us to really take the transition mineral conversation a bit more serious and not necessarily contextualize it in general conversations on minerals. One, there's a lot of the environmental issues, and we did say mining has risks. So a lot of the mass pollution, land degradation is happening in these two countries. The labor issue is a big one. While the mining sector is meant to create jobs, the artisanal and small-scale miners are really exposed to some of the most unsafe working conditions. Even in the context of speaking out, a lot of people in the DRC have really died as a result of speaking out against some of these private sector cooperatives, or even some of the governance issues that we see in the DRC. So even coming forward to the bank and submitting complaints, and it's really difficult for a lot of these communities to come forward. But also child labor is a big, massive issue within these different communities. We're seeing a lot of children being exploited and working within the mines, and that shouldn't really be happening. A lot of health impacts. So even the safeguards around health are not necessarily applied really well. So there's a lot of exposure to like mercury, cyanide, and a lot of the health issues then are emerging. But what we are seeing is that the health issues are mainly impacting women and children. So yes, they are impacting everybody, the minors, but we're seeing a big impact towards women and children, and we think, again, that's a problem. But there's also then displacement and loss of income. Because some of these communities have agriculture and fishing as local economies, because of the mining, those kind of industries are dying out, and now everybody kind of needs to do mining. Not everybody wants to do mining, but also the agriculture and fishing economies are very important for local economic development. And if we're not necessarily regulating how the mining sector is going to then impact other economies, then we're losing out on economic development, particularly local economic development, which you mainly find women and youth within those sectors. And then I just want to speak to the safeguards part of it. So while there's all these risk assessments, which we find to be really weak, and all these safeguards and processes put into place, some of the things that we have heard about in terms of, feedback from the community. So there's limited consultation in these projects. There's weak grievance mechanisms. And like I said, when people speak out, you're not even sure if you're going to survive the next day. Then there's inconsistent application of safeguards across the different projects. There's poor risk assessments as well, and just a lack of transparency in terms of how these projects unfold. The benefit component is not being seen by these communities. So it's going to be very much important to understand and realize that the transition minerals conversation the demand is increasing, like we said. But at the same time, the private sector component also, I just want to say, we're not against private sector, but private sector without safeguards or guardrails is such a big problem, particularly on the African continent, because private sector gets away with a lot of things, and accountability mechanisms towards private sector is not necessarily there. So it's going to be important for us to somehow ensure that safeguards are stronger, risk assessments are stronger, and the World Bank needs to do more than, categorize all these minerals and metals in the context of just general mineral governance. We do need something like a policy. We need some kind of regulation in terms of implementation as well. But Africa can no longer be the supplier in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Karabo. Very important perspectives as well. So we're going to hear from Leandro next, who is also the principal organizer of this session. So thank you, Leandro, for putting it together. So Leandro Gomez is the coordinator of the Investments and Rights Program at Fundación Ambiente y Recursos Naturales in Argentina. He is also part of the coordination committee of the OECD Watch Network and has 7 years of experience monitoring IFIs in Argentina and its role in the energy transition in collaboration with local communities affected by lithium mining operations. Let's take it away, Leandro.
Thank you, Daniel, and thanks all of you to be here. That's a pleasure to me to be part of this panel. So I have some notes here, and some of my points were already mentioned. So I want just to try to move forward, but first of all, we have to say that according to the World Bank, to satisfy the demand of minerals for the energy transition for 2050 has to increase 500% just to reach the goal of the Paris alignment. So we want to reach the goal of the Paris alignment, yes, obviously. But what are we doing for that? Is this the way that we have to reach that goal, to keep mining? So to satisfy the demand of critical minerals, means more than 3 tons billion of minerals that have been exploited around the world. That's translating more mines, which means more pressure over the territories, more pressure to the communities who lives in those territories. So obviously, as I say, we want to reach the Paris alignment goal, but is this the way to do that? As an environmental organization, we support, obviously, the energy transition. But the energy transition is not only replacing one energy by another. It's not only replacing one car by an electric one. It's more than that. We had to rethink our transportation system. We have to rethink our use of energy. We have to reduce our overconsumption, among other actions. So, and the World Bank actually supports some of these actions that I recently mentioned, but at the same time is promoting the exploitation of the critical minerals and seems to put more effort on the mining sector than the other one. And we need to recognize first that we have to reduce the demand of the minerals for the energy transition. We don't have to increase mining to reach the demand. We have to work to reduce the demand first. And we would like to see more effort of the World Bank Group on this. First, recognizing the need to reduce the demand. So what I see here is that we are losing an opportunity to have a more just energy transition. And the World Bank can have an important role here, has a leading role between MDBs and also has a norm-setting role with governments in the Global South, which, as we have seen recently, most of the mining projects are having place. So in this line, we have to reinforce our efforts to promote cross-cutting actions to reduce the demand of these minerals. And we have to stop supporting those projects and those governmental initiatives that we can say are being as business as usual model, with environmental impacts, human rights violations, and so on that were already mentioned. So I know that I'm running out of time, so I'm not, more or less, okay. So just to give one example here. The IFC supported one project in Argentina, which was Sal de Vida project. In that case, we worked with local community and we presented to the IFC a report pointed out the underestimation of social and environmental risk, a weak consultation process, potential impacts of cultural heritage, accumulative environmental impacts related to this project and the area where the project was going to be developed. But at this moment, the IFC staff didn't pay attention to our report, and they move on with the projects. So at the end, the mining company decided to stop the relation with the bank, with the IFC. But however, until that moment, the IFC were deciding to support the project. And here, my point is, they were not listening us, or they were not listening the local community that came to them to say what's going on the ground. And this is, for us, an important issue. When we are talking about community engagement, that's the case that we are having. The community came here to try to engage with the bank and say what's going on the ground, and the bank didn't pay, the IFC didn't pay attention to that. So we had to rethink how the community engagement is being developed. And this also is important for those initiatives related to the public sector, to governmental initiatives. And in this, issue, I have to mention that we have here, at least in Argentina, one positive case in which a local community tried to reach the World Bank, and they were listened by the World Bank, and they suspended their support to a governmental initiative until there were a dialogue with the local community. So we have to recognize that, and that was really positive for the local community. But what we are seeing is that that's an exception, it's not the rule, and that must be the rule, to listen who is in the ground, to listen who are suffering the consequences of these initiatives, of these projects. So in this context, as many of you know, the UN creates a panel on critical minerals, on minerals for the energy transition. And it is, there are governments and also non-state actors. And the World Bank is one of those actors. And we welcome the participation of the World Bank in this UN panel. And they elaborated a document with principles, which that's great. But now we need to see it into practice. How are we going to implement these principles? These principles talks about human rights, putting human rights in the center, to respect the limits of the environment, to fair and just investments, and a lot of things that we have listened a lot of time. But we need to see that put into practice in the ground. So some ideas to do that as soon as possible, because our delays are consequences on the ground, are people suffering, are environmental impacts. So some ideas could be for the World Bank group to recognize, first of all, the need to reduce the demand, to implement concrete actions to reduce the demand of these minerals, instead of be running for more mining projects. A second point could be to support a local just transition at the center of investments, rather than invest in export driver expansionist projects. We have to, most of the projects are in the Global South, but most of the countries in the Global South are not part of the energy transition. So what role are we playing here? And for this, we need to lift some barriers related to debt levels, trade barriers. We need to finish the support to investor-state dispute settlements. This is very, very important point. And obviously, we have to start supporting technology transfer. And just to finish, we talk about accountability and we talk about safeguards. And there's an important gap between what the safeguards say and what is implemented on the ground. So we need to improve the implementation of these safeguards. And we also need to reinforce these safeguards. And as Daniel mentioned previously, now the sustainability framework review of the IBC is an important opportunity to reinforce these safeguards. For example, the implementation of the FPIC in the IFC has conditions. And here we are having a big, big problem. The 169 Convention of the, sorry, but I don't know in English, OIT. Thank you. The ILO doesn't put conditions on that. The FPIC, the free, previous, and informing consent is mandatory anytime there is a local indigenous communities involved. And if the communities say no to the project, it is binding. It's not a condition there. And we need that the World Bank could understand and implement it. So now the IFC review of the sustainability framework is an important opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Leandro. Before we come to Anna Rudder, I can see that our last speaker has made it from the airport. So I'm just going to very quickly invite Latif to maybe just come in and join the panel and make a quick intervention. So Latif Jahar Baloch is an independent researcher, and he's a member of the Human Rights Council of Balochistan as well. So we'll hear from Latif quickly, and then we'll come to Anna Rudder before we sort of have some responses and questions.
Thank you so much. Sorry for my this look, because I was sleeping at Montreal airport last night, and my all accounts I have to change the passwords. My tickets got cancelled. According to Air Canada, someone stole my credit card or something. So I don't have access to my notes and everything, but I try to share some personal life experience and also reporting experience, particularly from Balochistan, because as probably your friends at World Bank and IMF are well aware about the recordic mining project in Balochistan, and that's the reason I was invited to come here. And first of all, thank you so much for organizing this and allowing us to share our experience. And it's rare to see people from the ground to come speak at the event like this, and that's the gap. The international organizations and particularly responsible institutions don't have access to the ground, particularly the areas, as you were saying a words could get you killed, or helping a person, they say a word, can get you abducted and killed. And in this situation, how we assess the environmental impacts, or how we engage community members, and how we make sure, as our friends were speaking about, the transparency is practiced in goodwill and in a better way that justice is served. I think if we talk about the Barrick Gold and recordic mining project, two things comes in past. First thing is, of course, the right to self-determination of Balochistan's people, and after that comes transparency. People still don't know, Balochistan's people still don't know what is in it, in this project, in this agreement, which was first declared illegal by Pakistan Supreme Court in 2011. And then after almost 10 years, 2022, the same Supreme Court said it's okay to go. And then comes another law, Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Act, which supposedly to stop people even from protesting these kind of projects. So the region where the minings are, like operations are carrying out, we must know Pakistan did test its nukes on the very mountains. Chinese and my own country's Canada's mining companies are taking gold and copper and other, we don't know how many minerals. As I said, transparency is the big issue. And there was no duck and cover policy after the nukes. There was no reported cases, probably because lack of medical assessment and everything, but people were not aware of any cancer cases before 1998. But now thousands of people die every year. On top of that, now Chinese mining companies, particularly at Sandak project, it's like 100 kilometers away from the recordic mining project, digging out and sucking the water. The Chagi district is the most driest district, not only in Balochistan, but entire region in Pakistan. And people's livelihood based on small-scale agriculture, livestock. 75% people rely on that. And Barrick's report says there's just salty waters, and there's no like population around that mining projects, but it's not true. There are people live there. People, the spring water comes, it's very real. Groundwater is going deep and deep and deep and down. And drought, Chagi is most affected region. Recently, like 2 months ago, a local journalist, top English newspaper in Pakistan, Dawn.com, reported that people are being displaced from the same spring waters before the Chinese mining companies were sucking it for their to clean whatever they want to take and sell to the world. We talk here about clean transition, a mineral transition. We sit in DC, talk about that because we need those minerals. Even my own country says it's part of our national security issue. We need to have more minerals than any other country. But what about those people's security and livelihood issues? So, sorry, I don't, because my notes are all gone. So this is also there was a case to the Balochistan High Court to publish the reports and documents, but nothing happened. Courts, both governments, provincial government, which is alleged that supported and brought by the Pakistan military, which you have seen probably recently, Pakistan Army Chief brought some very precious minerals to the White House and show your president and saying that you should work with us, but they didn't tell us where they are from. And militarization. Recently, one very outspoken person, peaceful person from the very area village, Barrick is digging, saying that at 2028 they will bring in gold and copper. The military stormed his home, attacked and killed him. And when you see the videos, you feel like there was like two militaries have been fighting, and they alleged him being a militant. It's not true. He's part of that student organization in Balochistan, even they are criticized being close to the Pakistani state. So in this situation, my question would be how we can make sure transparency and public engagement, and even our own friends, if they went for assessment, your friends should ask them how was the military situation there, how they went to the people, how many military personnel was with them, and how many checkpoints from probably a few kilometers to the mining site, and how Barrick Gold's CEO visit the fly with military jets or like helicopters. So these are, as our friends were saying, that we don't know about these things because we don't have access. We have to focus on these things. Sorry, and thank you for listening, and sorry if I may missy notes and here and there talks. So hopefully I will learn more from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Latif, for those sharing those sobering experiences. And yeah, sorry to cut you off, but we are going to hear next from Anna Rudder-Roy from the IFC, and then we'll make sure that there's time for some other responses and questions at the end. So Anna Rudder-Roy is a Principal Investments Officer in the IFC Metals and Mining Group based in Washington, D.C. Mr. Roy has diverse experience of more than 20 years in financial services across the private sector and in development finance, starting with Citibank and then with IFC. Mr. Roy has worked across several sectors in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Please take it away.
Thank you, Daniel. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity. These forums allow us to discuss the importance of this sector, and also not just that, but the progress we are trying to make with our ongoing collaboration with all of you. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to be brief because my colleague Robert covered most of the approach we have towards this sector. So I'm going to talk broadly about the sector and not any specific projects and our approach to this sector. When we look at a mining project, the first thing we look at is try to work with clients and sponsors who are aligned with our principles of responsible mining development. I'll start with something which Vaishnavi highlighted in her presentation about our early engagement in some of the environmental and social permits and applications. Why do we do that? The reason we do that is that it enables us to influence the process and make sure that the approach they follow is aligned with our sustainability principles. Karabo spoke about establishing guardrails. What we do through this process and early engagement, which is why we always ask our clients that get us into the project as early as possible so that we can improve some of the things which are being discussed in this room today. What we try and do is to ensure that community concerns are heard, adequate safeguards are built in, grievance mechanisms are established, including whistleblower policies. There are no retaliation policies. All those things are all inbuilt into the process. We look at not just communities, but also impacts on land, biodiversity, and community resettlement as a part of the due diligence and appraisal. Wherever possible, recycling opportunities are built in. To your point, Leandro, about resource conservation, recycling opportunities are inbuilt into the process cycle as a part of our due diligence and appraisal. I'll give a couple of examples of, we also have a sustainable infrastructure advisory team who work closely with us on the ground. Some of you all may be familiar with the work they do, but they essentially focus on 3 aspects, and we try and implement this in every project we work in. The first, and again, some of you all referred to about the importance of transparency and disclosure. We follow the extractive industries transparency initiative approach in all the projects which we finance, where revenues and payments made by the companies in the form of royalties and taxes to governments are publicly disclosed. This is very important so that communities understand the revenues the governments are getting and how it feeds back to them in terms of their development. The second approach they work on is municipal capacity building. As many of you all have rightly pointed out, some of these provinces are, they have several challenges. And one of the biggest challenges which we encounter is how do we use the money generated from these projects productively. So that is an area which this particular group focuses on quite closely and works with improving the capacity building of the local municipal organizations. And the third, which is very important, is how do the projects work with the local communities to improve their livelihoods and offer opportunities for them to participate in the immediate economic opportunities offered by that project through supply chain linkages. I'll give you an example of the work this particular group has done in the Moquegua region in Peru with our client Anglo American, where they work specifically on disclosure. 75% of the GDP of that province comes from mining. This particular group worked with our client to improve the disclosure standards of all the revenues and taxes being paid to the community, improve local community linkages, and there were 1,200 people contacted across 42 workshops, including 50% women. So we place very close attention to all gender-related issues, recognizing the importance of involving women in the conversation and the dialogue. In terms of all the projects we finance, we look at also local employment. For example, in Argentina, 70% of the employment comes from the province in which the project is located. All these things feed into the projects which we finance, and the objective is to ultimately ensure an environment where the project benefits the local communities and the government equitably. I'll stop here. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Aniruddha. Top marks for brevity. So before we open up for questions, I'm just going to invite any of the other speakers on the panel, if you've got kind of a 30 to 60-second response to anything you've heard so far, or just kind of quick additional points before we go to the floor. I don't know, Leandro, if you've got time. Or...
Yes, thank you. And just one thing that I want to clarify is that after listening all the presentations, is that we can think or highlight what are the revenues of this activity, or the need to put more transparency on how these revenues are being used and so on. But what we are talking about here when we talk about critical minerals, mineral for the energy transition in the Global South, we are talking about human rights violations, basically. We are not thinking on which are the uses of these revenues, which are obviously really, really important. But I think that is more important what's happening on the ground with the communities. The cases that we were saying recently, the people dying. We are talking about the access to water, something basic for the local communities living there. So what we are just doing here is calling the World Bank Group to have a more human rights perspective on how these projects are being developed and to put first the decision of the local communities to implement a community engagement, concrete, real, listening what the communities are saying and respect the right of the communities to say no. Then, if the communities accept the project, we can start thinking how is the project going to be implemented there. Thank you.
Karabo, next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, had I not, had exposure to some of the communities, whether it's Ghana, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, DRC, and I was listening to, all the interventions that you guys have, I genuinely would say there's a lot going on, a lot of, assessments are effective, or a lot of the system is really effective. Putting on my lawyer hat, I can say that having designed policies and frameworks and all of these things, how they actually unfold on the ground is completely different. We've sat, designed policies and frameworks and realized that this actually sucks. It's not working at a community level. So what I'm realizing from the case studies we've brought and all of the things that the bank has, there's a gap. Clearly there's a gap. Something is not working because how they've been designed, they really sound effective. I'm not even going to lie. But how it is that they've been rolled out and what we are seeing on the ground, there's definitely a gap, and communities and all these social and environmental issues we are seeing reflect that. So we may need to go back to the drawing board and reflect on whether the frameworks and policies and all of these things that have been put in place are really effective in the context of transition mineral projects.
And I think Anna Rudder wanted to jump in quickly.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge again that we are here to listen and understand from you what you think we should be doing better. But I also wanted to, and thank you for that, really appreciate that. I just wanted to reiterate that all the projects we invest in as a part of our input into the environmental and social impact assessment and the due diligence, community consultation and ensuring community support for the project is an integral part of the work we do. So I just wanted to, again, reiterate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add that there can be a gap in the implementation of due diligence of these projects also because of the fact that the environment and social regulations in the countries they are being implemented are being diluted. I come from India, where we've had a lot of communities impacted by bauxite and zinc mines, and just last month, the environment social impact assessment for all critical minerals were removed. And also highlighting that many of the countries, there are restricted civic spaces which make it almost impossible for there to be any stakeholder engagement. So World Bank and MDBs have a more critical role to also ensuring that the clients that they're working with, the governments that they're supporting, have proper regulations in place, because just having the safeguards is not enough if the companies and governments that are getting these investments are not complying with them as well.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. Just for 30 seconds, I wanted to address a couple of things that were said. So thank you very much for highlighting the situation that you're seeing currently in the DRC. And yes, we have been engaged in a Promene project, but also to clarify, the Promene project, to my knowledge, is closed in 2017. So what is going on today in the DRC is not related to the Promene project. That said, we are working also through a global initiative on the ASM sector. And I do believe that a lot of what I presented today on the slide is relating to the World Bank Group strategy on a broader scale, industrial mining. We also do believe ASM is a sector in itself, which needs to be properly studied and tackled. And I do believe we are still gathering through this initiatives we are having in partnerships to find the right place that we may and should take in this, because all what you describe, shows it is very complex and it has dire consequences if not done right. The other quick comment, and I know I'm over 30 seconds already. Leandro, I liked a lot what you said, and thank you. I know we had a discussion last year about this one study we did on a desk basis. And I also like what you're saying, can we help in having less pressure on minerals demand? Now, first, I would like to say we are also looking into recycling, into repurposing of mine lands to really restrict the footprint of the mining industry. But one thing I think is also we need to be very clear of. I heard today we speak all about energy transition minerals. Yes, the UN panel also referred to it. But let's be clear. The pressure on minerals is not the energy transition. It goes far beyond. I believe everybody here in the room and online has this. Do you know how much raw material you need to extract for one single device? 70 kilo. 70. So if you really want to have a conversation about reducing the demand on minerals, we better think twice when we buy another device. And it's not only that, but it's also urbanization, digitalization, and agriculture. So in our dialogue we recently had with our board of shareholders, we made clear we do believe the minerals necessary for fertilizer, potash, and so forth are becoming another very critical element of development. We have many countries who need to develop these resources to ensure food security for their people and their future generations. So to us at the World Bank Group, the mining agenda goes way beyond energy transition minerals, and I hope we can all bear this in mind when we talk about how we can reduce the pressure on it, because I'm all for it, but it's very, very complex.
Thank you. And Latif, quickly, I don't know if you've got any last response.
I think from my own experience, I think it would be...
So just turn on the microphone.
Sorry. I think World Bank, IMF, and other multinational development banks, from my understanding, from my experience, right now at the moment, more powerful than the United Nations. They can pressurize governments like Pakistan to change things because it involves money and loans. And my recommendations are, whenever banks like World Bank with the big power give some loans to an organization, I think the first mandatory point should be there would be independent monitoring, investigations, and reporting. And that would not only be carried out by the World Bank or IMF, that include United Nations, local human rights organizations, community members, journalists, students. In that sense, the local people see it, they are doing the things, they are deciding their fate and their... right now, there are many assessments the companies claim, but I spend my entire life, I don't know who they are working these things. How the people on the ground, they see just bombs and bullets. When they are involved, I think that should be the first point of all loans and funding, not only from the banks, from the powerful governments, including the US, European Unions, because these loans, money make governments like Pakistan to change things, to act. No Amnesty International report so far affected. Neither the UN experts issued like 3 or 4 reports on Balochistan's peaceful protesters being abducted and killed. Pakistan even replied to claiming that their credibilities are taking their credibilities. So these are my recommendations, and from my own experience, because I'm working with the local people, community organizations, and.
Great, thank you, Latif. So we'll open up the floor for questions now. I think we've got two roving mics. So yeah, please raise your hand, and we'll sort of try and take some from different parts of the room. So I had one question here at the front first, and then we'll go to the gentleman at the back maybe after.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's Catherine Tay. I'm the Executive Chair of Spectrum Development. I was interested in the issue of how we address what essentially is now a tipping point for all of the activity we've done on energy transition and forecast to do. It actually might be worse for the planet than just sticking with fossil fuels. So there needs to be an alternative approach. And so I 100% agree with that. But one of the areas we thought might be a good way to start is looking at what I call the stranded or frozen assets, the tier 1 assets that have had previous environmental and human rights conflicts, perhaps being interrogated because there's like $1 trillion or more of copper, for example, in stranded assets at the moment. And instead of looking for much smaller, newer mines and this whole effort that if you look at the IEA's forecasts require like 50 new copper mines, you could actually just do it all in 5 if you were to actually be able to resolve those issues by consent with the communities. So I'm all for resolving the issues with the communities, and I think it can be done in the places where there are very rich deposits. And that is an alternative way of thinking about, constraining the impacts of mining by looking, if you like, at the most efficient and effective way of doing it. I'm keen on comments.
Thank you. So the gentleman at the back, and then we'll take one more question from this side, I think, afterwards.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to you and your team for such a wonderful event. I think we can give them a round of applause. My name is Prosper, originally from Ghana, but I'm coming from Harvard University, where I write and simulate case studies on mining, environment, and international development. And throughout the presentations from the panelists, the elephant in the room has been mentioned several times, but I don't see the elephant in the room or on the panel. It is great, my very good friend, that World Bank can restrict or put conditionalities on loans to governments. My dear sister from South Africa, yes, mining has some neo-colonialism or colonialism, connotations. But the elephant in the room is government. If government decides to change a new leaf, the conversation here will differ. My question is, and based on my case study writing and simulation, it is great if you have government on the table. It appears we are just singing or preaching to the choir. Why is government, either from South Africa, Pakistan, or Zimbabwe or Zambia, not on the table? We disagree with them, but I believe if they sit on the table and we keep talking with each other instead of at each other, I believe we can make progress. So my question is, why is government not on the table? Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think the gentleman on that side, maybe for last question this round, I'll come to you in the next round if that's okay. We'll just take the first 3 and let the panelists respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What an excellent panel, and very interesting to see the diversity on the panel. My name is Ian Pringle. I'm with Farm Radio International. We are a communication for development organization. I heard a lot about community consultations, the importance of community consultations, the challenge of community consultations. So my question is, are there some good practices that go beyond sort of initial consultations with communities that might extend over the life of mining work? We've been in discussions with Global Affairs Canada and other agencies about how to develop social licenses around mining with communities. So my second question is it possible, we ended on a bit of a negative note, but I wonder, is it possible for us to think about developing social license with communities? And again, if there's any good practices around how communities have really, truly been engaged in the process.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll take some quick responses from the panel. Robert, I was wondering if I could come to you first, maybe. Maybe it'd be interesting to hear in response to the question on the role of governments, given you're the kind of the public side of the bank. If you had any thoughts on that, maybe.
Right. So I must admit I have not been fully in the loop when this was organized. So indeed, I would have welcomed also having a government representative here. As you know, the World Bank and what I spoke about, helping governments on the enabling environment, we're doing that. But I can also not say that I'm speaking on behalf of all of these governments. So please appreciate that, other than the comment that, there's a responsibility by governments, I agree. And let's also agree there's a responsibility of every stakeholder. There's also a responsibility of responsible private sector that has to play a role. And there is responsibilities of the communities. There's responsibilities also of the other partners in the value chain that we're needing. So I'm all for having more on the panel, but allow me to excuse myself on explaining exactly why the government. I have not said I don't want to have a government representative on the panel.
Any other responses from the panelists? Leandro, I don't know if you want.
I can answer the gentleman's question over there. I think that's a very important question. Thank you. The objective when we invest in a project is exactly as you outlined, that how can we ensure community benefits are distributed across the life of the project, not just during the due diligence phase. I think that's a very important point. And that's exactly why I referred to. So what we do as a part of every investment, we assess broad community support. And that is done as a part of the due diligence. But along the life of the IFC investment, you will obviously recognize that some of the mining projects last longer than our investment. And when it's repaid in full, we no longer have the legal rights to continue to supervise the project. But as long as we do, we ensure adequate supervision of the project on an ongoing basis. And I also referred to our Sustainable Infrastructure Advisory Team. These are people on the ground working with our client companies and local communities to continuously assess and implement how local communities can benefit from these projects, including supplier chain linkages, and how provincial governments can improve their capacity to serve the local communities. But thank you for the question. It's a very important point.
Great. I think Leandro is going to come in next, and then maybe Vaishnavi, or you want to? Go ahead.
Yes, thanks for your comments, for your questions. Just quick reactions related to governments in the table. Well, unfortunately, I have to say that in my experience, local governments doesn't seem to be very open to a dialogue with those voices that are pointed out some environmental issues or human rights violations. So I think that's why the government is not sitting at the table. Maybe that's a question for the governments, why they are not listening to us, or what they are refusing to have any kind of dialogue. And in that line also, we are having here this dialogue with the World Bank Group, because we think that the World Bank can also be a bridge to reach those decision makers. And related to that, but for that, first we need that the World Bank listen to us, right? So, and that takes me to the community engagement and good practices. And also I have to start with, unfortunately, we are not having good practices here. The exception that I mentioned before, that was the only case that I can say that was a good practice. And I really I'm thankful, and the local community is thankful to be listened in that case. And we hope that could be reply this practice in other cases. But in most of them, we are not seeing good practices in community engagement. We are having due diligence policies. We are having safeguards, but what happened in the ground, how these safeguards and due diligence are being implemented are not exactly best practices.
I'm just going to very quickly take this question because I did promise to come back to you, and then we might have to just start wrapping up.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Imam Shafi Abdul Karim from Nigeria. I'm the founder of the Strength in Diversity Development Center and also the Open Farm Nigeria. I will start, Michael, with a question. Why is it that most of the countries that have these resources are bewildered in crisis and wars? What we see, I have a very good example in Nigeria, whereby Nigeria has more than 140 different resources on the ground. Recently, apart from the oil, recently we have gold. No, maybe I will not say recently discovered, but what we have seen, those communities that have this gold, most of them are crippling in serious crisis. Instead of us having wealth for life, what we are seeing is life for wealth.
Could you just put that as a question?
So my question is that what is the World Bank doing with your country office, most especially in Africa, in terms of mitigating this crisis so that we will have wealth for life, not life for wealth? Thank you.
Thank you. So Vaishnavi is just going to come back on the first question quickly, and I'll go to the panelists on that side, and then we'll just have to wrap up after that. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like your question kind of answered some of the previous questions on resolving issues with communities and social licenses. I mean, how is it even possible for communities to be on the same table when they have been facing exploitation for such a long time, and specifically in areas where mining has been going? There is nothing left there. I used to work in a zinc mining area, which is one of the oldest zinc reserves in the world, and still the world's largest zinc reserve in India. And mining has been going on there for so many years that there's no groundwater left. The water that is there is completely contaminated. So, and now zinc is considered a transition mineral, so mining is going to expand there. So I'm not sure how there can be any kind of benefit sharing in such a situation where resources have been exploited to the fullest. So I think there has to be a different approach in how mining is happening in the first place, instead of thinking what could we do after when the harm is already done. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So on your question about what is the World Bank doing, first of all, I think in the mining department ourselves, we are since close to 20 years involved in the Extractors Industry Transparency Initiative, because we believe, and I think it has been discussed here multiple times, transparency and clarity on terms is a first important ingredient to put everybody on the same page. When it comes to benefit sharing, I hear what you're saying on the environmental side, but I still do believe arm's length contracts and benefit sharing between the public and the private sector is another important ingredient. And the third one is fair royalty and tax regimes. Here also we are doing since multiple decades advisory to governments how you are getting a fair share for them. Now, the other thing I wanted to say, Leandro, I appreciate that you are singling out one successful case where we listened. I want to also be clear with the audience. I presented today, the new momentum we gained recently in engaging in mining and minerals. But also our activities in that sector over the last couple of years have been really very restricted. So that might be the reason why you may have not more positive examples, because the reality is we have not been doing much in the sector because we did not have a mandate. I hope this will change. And also let me be clear, I truly do believe that our environmental and social framework as it is designed and informed by civil society as well, clearly puts the government in the front seat on consultations, on having a dialogue. I can wholeheartedly say in a recent preparation of a project in another country in the same region we discuss, we just had successful consultations and they were led by government. So I do believe our framework is fit for purpose and that governments taking the fair and share responsibility they need in our projects to inform the community and have a dialogue. Thank you.
Karabo or Latif, would you like to answer any of the questions or just very quick last remarks?
Yeah, questions are good. I think our friends ask, I think everything is possible, particularly powers like World Bank, IMF, and United Nations, and America, US, European Unions. Community good practices are what? Like, if you grow up in a community, in a tribal community or a rural area, the practices are respect, caring for each other, listening to each other, giving them expression that you are doing it for them and they are helping you to do that. That's missing right now in our entire mechanisms. Communities even don't understand what is in this project, what is in this agreement, in what language. So, second thing, when you meet the community people, they should never feel pressure or fear of any consequences. That's where the genuine decisions comes. That's where people feel, yes, you are talking to them and you are working with them, not under the bullets and military guns. And you said there are always crises in where the minerals are. I will give you an example. I was talking about the Chagi district in Balochistan. Two superpowers right now fighting, China and the US, for the minerals there within a few kilometers. So this is a big deal. It's a big challenge. It could go to war with each other because of these minerals. If we don't take care about communities, don't take with them, there's going to be disaster, not development. We should consider these challenges, big competitions, and the value, power of the local people. So, thank you.
Yeah, mine's going to be short. So, the first time I came to the World Bank annuals, I said that the decisions and investment that the World Bank makes are not just transactions. They define our daily lives. They define our communities. They define our development. It's really crucial that at the heart of the entire concept of development, communities and the beneficiaries of the work that the bank does are really placed at the heart of it all. And as civil society, I just want to emphasize the fact that we are here to really make sure that anything that the bank does is done well to serve these very communities. So we're not enemies. We're really here to make sure that all of it moves progressively well and we are contributing collectively to the development agenda.
Thank you, Karabo. So I'd just like to very quickly extend thanks to Leandro and the Big Shift Global Coalition for organising today's session. I think it's been a very constructive dialogue, and we hope to continue this dialogue with the World Bank and IFC, and continue to work together to ensure that MDBs are doing their utmost to uphold and extend rights to communities, indigenous peoples, and the environment, and that they're facilitating a genuinely just transition. So thank you, everyone, for taking part.